Stevenson Bone, and Western Mustang alumni, football alumni, quarterback, backup quarterback for Western there. And first of all, I was thank you for taking some time and getting the chat and really just talk about your career. I think you have a really great career and insight that we can bring to some of our coaches and players, parents out there. So we'll kind of get into that. I just want to, lay the groundwork a little bit and why, we reached out and why I think this is going to be a real great, piece of content here is, so Stevenson grew up playing football and, I don't know exactly on the minor or the youth side, but finished his playing career with his dad as his coach, if I'm not wrong about that.
Yeah, he was my positional coach. He wasn't the head coach, but he was.
Yes, quarterback coach, right?
Yep.
So I think that's not a unique situation. Lots of parent coaches out there. This is a little bit probably of a higher level than what a lot of athletes end up at. But I think we can kind of bring some similar experiences and dynamics that happen on and off the field, and just really share with everyone, listening or watching, what that looked like, day to day, in season, off season, all those types of things.
Yeah. So I guess the background would be, when I was growing up, I was the smallest kid on the team. I was the youngest birthday, the smallest kid, and I always was, trying to play. I played all different kinds of sports. My, a little background, my father he was the first Canadian quarterback to ever sign in the NFL. So he was the first Canadian quarterback to ever sign a contract. He signed a contract with Dallas.
Amazing.
So he was, he won 2 national championships and was the Heck Crichton Trophy winner, kind of the Canada equivalent of the Heisman Trophy. And when he was there back in the 80s, he was really, really good player. But so he never really even pushed me kind of to do that in terms of sports. He always was kind of saying, if you want to play something, play all of it. Don't just play one specific sport. So when I decided that I wanted to play football, and obviously he did broadcasting when I was kind of growing up, I thought, I really don't want to have him as my coach. And so for the first 2 years, I didn't have him as my coach. And he kind of saw what was happening at the minor level and just kind of said, if, my mom kind of pushed him. She said, Jamie, these coaches don't, some of them, he had a level that was higher, right? And he was great. He was a great teacher, great with kids. And so he kind of said, okay, I'll do it. I always wanted to be dad first, but I'll do it to help, the other kids kind of as well. So that's kind of how it started. So he was my youth football coach. And, I didn't play quarterback. I was on the defense. I was like last on the depth chart. I never played. And, I was always saying, Dad, why aren't you playing me?
You got to earn it. Yeah.
Kid, right? Exactly. So thankfully, going into high school, I didn't have him in grade 9. But in grade 10, our coach, he said, shoot, I know that your dad is, heck of a, former, his background was amazing. So let's hire your dad. So my high school coach hired my dad as the assistant quarterback coach.
I can't get away from you here, Dad.
So I had him in high school, and I never played. I was the backup. Honestly, Sean, I never threw a single pass in high school football, and I was the backup quarterback. Our team went to the state championship in Connecticut, but never got to play. And then I walked on basically after I went to CEGEP and went to Montreal. I walked on at Western, and I was the 8th string quarterback. And my dad had played at Western previously, but he was already there. After my high school, he kind of took a job full time. So he was there 2 years before I even walked on. And I was 8th string. I mean, first day, 7 quarterbacks get reps. I got no reps, and didn't get any reps. And it was a tough kind of climb. And then eventually I was the backup, and then I got to start a little bit in university. And then, it kind of culminated where I was the starter in my 4th year. And then in my 5th year, I was hurt, and then we won the national championship anyway. So it was kind of a really weird kind of dynamic. And he was kind of there all throughout the way. And if you had gone around and probably picked one kid to have one, sorry, just 1 second.
No worries.
Probably could pick one kid to have sorry, 1 sec. If there's one kid that they'd pick to be the last person, it would be me. Sorry, 1 second, Sean. I apologize.
That's okay. Don't worry. Don't sweat it.
Just 1 second. Yeah, sorry. If there was one kid that they pick on the team, it'd be me. It'd be the last kid. So So I apologize about that. Sorry about that.
That's all right. So jumping back a little bit, when you were, starting out and, you're talking about the bottom of the depth chart there and your
Yeah.
minor teams, um, did you ever think about, trying a different sport, right? I mean, you had
Yeah,
your
I tried
dad who's,
all of it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah,
So,
definitely.
so you
It's
played
kind of funny.
multiple
Football was
sports.
the last. Football was my last sport, really. I think, baseball, basketball, I was much better at all the other ones because it didn't really, size wasn't as an important thing. It just was.
Hmm.
And he was such a great dad where he never pressured me into ever playing football. He always
Amazing.
said, listen, it's really not, it's probably not for your body size. You're, 5 foot nothing, you weigh 130 pounds and you're, grade 11, so go play golf, go do something else, but I always just kind of found that I liked it the best, just the competition, just personal preference, I guess, like anyone picking any sport that they truly love. And he was so great about that, where there's a real separation, I think, in our household with kind of sport that he coached and then kind of how he was just as a dad, which was nice. And then kind of as we went more into university, it was more of a business-like approach where, I could approach him, but I was a little bit more guarded because I knew that if I ever disclose things, he's going to disclose it to the head guy. And,
Yeah.
I don't want that to happen. So I was a little bit more guarded, I'd say, and complain less. And that's also the nature of university where you don't live with your parents anymore, right? Like,
Hmm.
most people, they live away and I lived away. So I'd see him every day at practice, which was awesome because, in the fall, I get to see my dad every day. Not a lot of university kids can
No,
say
it's
that.
pretty unique. Yeah.
And for the first probably 10 minutes as we're warming up, he could ask me about academics and, talk about, my mom and just, stuff like that, which was kind of nice. And then, kind of as we transitioned into practice, the mindset completely changed, right? And it was more, okay, it's a business, like approach. He
Yeah.
would get on me. I even thought sometimes he got on me more than other quarterbacks just because he had to prove the point of that
Makes
I
sense.
can't favor
Yeah.
him. So sometimes I always thought, shit, if my last name was Smith, it might be better. He
Yeah.
might treat
Yeah.
me more fairly. So it kind of went the opposite. But that's kind of how it kind of was different at different stages, obviously. But
Yeah, amazing. So how did that, so when you were living together, I
yeah,
assume in high school,
high
right?
school. Yep.
How was like, the car ride home? How was dinner after a tough game?
Oh
Did,
man.
you talk about it? Was it, it sounds like he was pretty good at keeping, the game
Yeah.
and family life separate.
Yeah.
But did that ever spill over? Did that annoy you? Did
Oh
you
yeah.
love it? What did that look like?
It's amazing. I heard a great line once, and it was said, when I was 16, I thought my father knew nothing, and by the time I was 26, I was amazed about how much the old man had learned in 10 years.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of that same. It's kind of that same mentality where I was probably that hot-headed idiot 15-year-old that was saying this is what we should be doing. This is why we shouldn't be doing this, and he would just kind of sit there and take it and kind of be quiet. And then, I'd bring it up to my mom. I complained to her, I complained
Hmm.
to him, it'd be just back and forth. And we actually really were good at kind of leaving it, after it kind of happened that night or whatever, we kind of leave it. The next day was always kind of on to the next thing, which was really great in terms of moving on and not having, kind of it set as something where, you kind of dwelled on it. So yeah, no, it was really good in that regard. We were able to kind of separate the Fridays and the practice days away from the game day and kind of move on to the weekend and do whatever we need to do kind of as a family. So
For sure.
it was
Did
a
you
good
ever
separation.
did you ever feel, I guess, lucky in that, you can talk to your parent about the
Yeah,
sport and just
yeah,
because of his success in his
for
playing
sure.
career, just to kind of have,
Yeah,
little tips, mindset tips, even if
right.
it's not like getting out there and throwing every day. That must have been
Absolutely.
a huge leg up.
It was, and also the thing, he was always against, and just to put this out there, he was always against coaching his own kids. He never really wanted to do it, but I
Hmm.
feel like my mom pressured him saying, okay, well, more than the other guys. You have to help not just your kid, but all the other kids, you kind of owe it. And so I kind of feel the same way a little bit where, if you have a skill as a parent, in a certain niche, I know that you maybe want to separate, okay, you're playing with your kids playing, but it's one of those things where if you can help, go help that kid, there's so many kids looking for direction, right now that, if you
Yeah.
have the ability to help them, help them. So that's kind of the way he looked at it. And, I always felt that, he it's funny because he would come to all the other events, all the other sporting events, and he would just be dad, right?
Yeah.
But he would still give you that same kind of, hey, you got to, make those friggin' free throws.
Yeah.
You can't be missing those things. Get out there and practice those. If you're going to play on the team,
more shots.
Take it seriously. Right, exactly. And he never played a lick of basketball in his life. So it's one of those ones where, he would still kind of get on you about other things, which was, he was dad number one, but definitely coach there kind of always. And I feel like a lot of dads are like that.
Oh, for sure. Definitely. Yeah. Now, I think that's a really good point, is that, there's a lot of, parents these days who have played, and it doesn't really matter, I would say, the level of competition, right? He
Even
obviously
in high
kind of
school or something,
exactly.
Yeah.
There's, youth sports across this country just struggles with, finding appropriate volunteers and coaches. And, you hear about teams all the time folding because they just don't have anyone to coach or run the leagues, that type of thing. So I think that's really cool on your dad to kind of step into that, because I can totally understand where he came from, a certain level, and doesn't want to, maybe it's an intimidation thing, right? Where if you have a pro athlete now coaching, it's like, well, is that going to be too intense for my son?
He never wanted to, there's always, it kind of always hurts coaches' kids too, where, maybe socially it doesn't help them the same in terms of getting along with their peers, because their peers always think, okay, well, that's their dad. So it's, they get it easy, or that's a mentality of it where, he never wanted me to be like that in terms of growing up through sports. He always wanted me to be kind of just one of the normal, people.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way he was. And so I think that's kind of was his hesitation, right? He wasn't really the level of play. It was just more socially. He didn't want me to be labeled as the coach's kid. But I actually really like that now. I think it's really neat that I was able to I'd say overcome that to an extent.
I get it. Overcome it for sure.
Not that it's a detriment, but I feel like it's a two-way street, right? It kind of depends on both who your dad is. Some kids maybe have it easier than others, so I can't judge on that. I just say in mine, it was, he wasn't tough on me, but there was definitely a separation that occurred, when you're on the, court. It's actually, when you're on the field. There was one time I was doing a youth, soccer, I think it was in grade 8, and the coach left, and he actually took it on and knew nothing about it.
Okay.
His idea was that he could learn it faster than the other, grade 8 kids. And he was sitting there reading books, trying to figure out how to do that and set us up for success, to the best of his, he'd never played the game in his life. But it just kind of shows you, if you're able to read even just a little bit about something, probably better than kids in grade 8, then you have a leg up on them anyway, right? So no, I think that was really brave of him to do that, and kind of step into that role.
Well, I think, and I would imagine being at, a coach in football and, having, gone through every level of, football, he knows what it took to, run a successful practice and successful team. So those types of things, which I think are almost more important at the youth age, is, keeping kids engaged, having fun, making sure that they're, learning how to listen and interact with teammates and peers and, backup teammates, that type of thing. So really just had to learn like the skills, right? So kind of here's some drills, here's what we can do. You don't necessarily have to be good at it yourself, just to be able to communicate that. To the players.
Is the best teacher, right? The best coach is the best teacher. And honestly, the best coach that I ever had never picked up a ball or didn't know anything about any sports. He was my, high school choir teacher. This guy was amazing. He could get, all these kids corralled, set up for a show. It was unbelievable. The coordination that it took, the ability to kind of get all these different personalities working as one. And that skill alone is really what it is. It's less about the, the X's and O's. It's more about the Jimmies and the Joes, they say, right? In football, that's kind of the saying. And it's more about the people. It's always kind of been that way. It's a relationship kind of thing. And, for someone that I've coached high school kids now too, and it's all about trying to build that relationship with those kids. Right. So, more so than any knowledge you pick up. And obviously there's things to be said about playing the sport, obviously, but it definitely is not the deciding factor.
Absolutely. Yeah. So looking at, I would say kind of your high school athletic career, you said were you still playing multiple sports in high school, or did you now focus on football?
So I did both. It comes to a point where you can't play basketball and hockey in the same season. So I picked basketball. But I played baseball, and then I played lacrosse, and I did basketball and football, kind of on my high school teams. And some of them were kind of inter-town teams, and then some of them were actually for the high school. But mainly in high school, it was I was on base, and then I did track. I ran track for the high school track team too. So I did it all. And the thing is I think that's kind of what coaches in college were looking. Say university, they're always looking for those kids that can do multiple things. And I always wanted to just kind of be the best total athlete that I could be. In terms of that. So I think that was kind of the one reason that, he kind of said, do everything you can, because you're only going to be in high school once. And that's kind of the message that I have for kids too. And as a coach recruiting kids into university, you always want to see whether they play other sports. If they're just specialized in the one, and I find that sometimes they're lacking in other areas, just in the team aspect of it, because there's so many different good team sports where you need different pieces. And football is not unlike, baseball or basketball or, any other team sport, so.
Yeah. So now in university, you said you walked on to Western. As a lifelong backup, essentially, bottom of the depth chart, how did you decide that you wanted to, focus on football? I don't imagine, were you playing multiple sports in university and you walked onto a bunch, or was it like, I'm going to walk on? It's early on, right? It's the first sport of the season.
Yeah.
So did you just kind of, make it that year and say, all right, this is my thing? Or, how did you decide, okay, I'm going to focus now on football?
Well, I had a growth spurt in my last year, grade 12, and I kind of got to my current height. I always thought my mom's only 5'4", 5'3". I thought, man, I might be like my cousins, 5'8", 5'7", but I got to about 6 feet, and I could throw the ball harder. And I just felt at that time, maybe I can do this. I really wanted to do this. And I was going to go to college and do track actually and run, but I decided, what I was going to do is I wanted to go for it. So I went the prep school route where I could gain weight and kind of do that. And I went to Cégep in Montreal and played there and walked on there and finally made that team. And going to Western, I think there was a little bit of an arrogance where I thought, I thought that I was undervalued, I think, just because of my size. And I thought there's no reason that I can't play with these guys. I was at a camp, and I still vividly remember there was a kid throwing there that all the teams wanted. And I remember throwing next to him and thinking, I can do that. There's no reason that I can't throw like that guy. Now, at the time, was I as good as him? No. But in my mind, I thought I was. And that quality, I think, was instilled kind of at a young age where just, you can always be the toughest person on the field. You can always kind of control what you can control. And I mean, that's a great quality. I think that my dad probably, did that when I was in grade 7, kind of instilled that in me. But that was always my mindset. And the reason that I walked on at Western has nothing to do with him. It just had to deal with that they were the best team at the time. And that was the measuring stick. That was, if you can make there, you can play anywhere, and you've kind of made it to the pinnacle of university, in my eyes, of, in Ontario anyway. Of football, in terms of winning year in and year out, in terms of the history. So that's kind of why I decided to go there. If I'd gone to a McMaster or York or Toronto, and I applied to a lot of schools, but no one really recruited me. I wanted them to. There's one school, Concordia, that said, hey, we kind of want you, but it wasn't anything like, here's a scholarship. There was none of that. So it was
so, hey, check us out, come apply. Right?
And it's so interesting now is that in Ontario and university football, they have a rule that actually caps the number of tryouts at 100. The coaches can only have 100. And at the time when I tried out, it was uncapped. And so I think that I was able to actually just go to the camp and try out just because it was uncapped. And then they cut other quarterbacks. They cut probably 30 kids. And I was one of the kids that made it. And it's just amazing how, sometimes it just kind of works out for you. But then, it wasn't over then when I made the team. It was never really there's never a definitive you've made the team. It was always, you could get cut tomorrow. So you better every day play like it's the Super Bowl, because if you do really poorly tomorrow, well, they could just go get another rookie down the street, get cut, And my dad would have had no say in that at all. He wasn't the recruiter. He wasn't the head coach. He was just kind of there as a guy to, help develop the guys that were on the roster at the time. So, it was, you'd focus a bit more probably my first year and second year in university more than you'd party and kind of do that whole thing. I always thought that the big recruits are always doing that. You know, their spot was fine, that they were going to back up their first couple of years and then slide in. I wasn't afforded that luxury. So it was always every day you have to game face, you know? So, yeah, I think that's kind of the reason that I walked on, and just resiliency. You know, you just got to be resilient and don't let things kind of bother you. And I think that's kind of how I was as a player eventually too, when I actually ended up being able to start and play for the team. It was, you know, that same mentality, you know, that you bring to practice during the week when you're the number one quarterback, you know? So, yeah, it was a kind of a weird long career, but it was fun.
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds like that was, you know, definitely instilled early on because, like you said, you never, you know, that all-star stud standout even on your minor teams. So it wasn't like you know, just walked on to the team or kind of walked into the team as a starter or even a backup, like you said, like those heavily recruited athletes. And that, you know, would you say kind of that was from your dad, kind of that resiliency?
I think so. I mean, he was very different than me in terms of athletics. He started every game in high school. He started as a freshman, you know, and then he started for 4 years, and then he went to the NFL. I mean, he was very different. But I think, you know, athletically, but I think mentally, yeah, there's a lot of things that I got from him, and even after, you know, it was one of those ones where, you know, the first time I ever played was actually, you know, started a game was the university. It wasn't even in high school. I didn't throw a pass. You know,
wild. That's wild.
That, right? There's so many guys that get to play in high school that, you know, throw passes and are quarterbacks on their team. I never got to even step on the field one play. So, yeah, it's a cool story, you know, and I think that it's funny. Sometimes it was used as a detriment, where writers would, you know, in London anyway, they'd say that, oh, you know, because he was not highly recruited, and really we need to go get a guy that's better. Where I always looked at it as, wow, you actually got through all of that and still made it to this point. Shoot, if you played, maybe you'd be really, really good. So, you know, it was one of those ones where I always kind of viewed it through that lens, and they always kind of viewed it for the other lens. But no, it was, I think the resiliency thing probably comes more from my mom and my sister. My sister's she's a professional, like, pole vaulter. She trains out of Arizona. She's training for the Olympics for Team Canada. So I'd say that she kind of has always been really resilient. You know, what a tough sport that is too. So I'd say that that's probably where it's really from.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So, yeah, and I mean, like you said, I don't think it was like ever an easy route. You know, I'm obviously not a football player. I was never part of the Western staff, but, you know, I went to Western as well. Knowing the success of the program, you know, I can't imagine, you know, even as a, you know, dad even the head coach, that they're going to make decisions based on, you know, oh, this is my son, so he's going to play, right? I don't think you get to that level of success. You know, making decisions like that, right?
Yeah, he was never able to do that anyway. It was always the head guy was the guy that made those decisions.
He was just giving the athletes, you know, training these guys, make them great.
The head guy is always and I feel like that's kind of a football thing where the quarterback usually is kind of it's only a position where the backup really doesn't play a ton. You know, they don't switch in and out as much as other sports. So when that guy is your kind of face of your team and you make that decision, it's pretty important. So that was always never up to my dad. And it's so funny because sometimes you'd see in film at practice, you know, if it was ever a competitive, you know, scrimmage or something, and if I ever did well, you could kind of always see him. He was always, you know, I'd always watch him kind of on the film from the behind camera shot. I knew his body language of being nervous. Yeah. And he was always so nervous whenever I was in. And even when as a player, you know, my first start came at night, you know, he wouldn't talk to me the whole day. He was nervous more than I was, you know. So it's kind of funny. So yeah, no, it was really special kind of having him around kind of all through all the, you know, phases. And it's weird right now, even just doing this, you know, you so many things come flooding back in your mind. You know, wow, that story and that time. Yeah. So. Yeah.
It just comes flooding back. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, I kind of want to let you kind of give, you know, two final words, I guess maybe two pieces of advice. One, so for the parents out there, right?
Yeah.
So from the athletes or the kids' perspective, what's something you want parent coaches to know, whether they're coaching an 8U team, just rec house league, up to say 16, 17, kind of prepping
Sure.
for that next level or college.
Yeah.
What's something you want to say to those parent athletes?
I'd say always just keep it enjoyable. I think that
Yeah.
some of my best memories, growing up were sports related memories on teams where I didn't even play a heck of a lot. Baseball, rally caps on, cheering on the fences with your, sixth grade buddies, chewing bubble gum, going crazy, scoring 6 runs in the bottom of the ninth. It's one of those ones where you think of those memories. And I think the best coaches I ever had just kept it really light. They were encouraging kind of at all times, and they were fair and they're honest. They really were able to kind of talk to people and kind of let them know where they're at. Which, kids, I feel like parents sometimes think that kids aren't stupid. Kids are the first people that know who are good on their own team and who are bad on their own team. It's not the
100%. Yes.
coaches.
Yeah.
So you have to realize when you lie to a kid, sometimes they can see right through that. So you always have to keep it honest and truthful with them. Even if they're bad, you can say, okay, but never, ever, ever, I'd say ever discourage a kid from playing the sport if he enjoys it. He may be bad at it, but shoot, you just don't know, what he's going to look like when he's 18 years old, and there's so many kids that I can remember that were small, and when I was in grade 3 and 4, that, the coach told them, you're not going to play football. Those kids, when we're in high school, they're 6'3", 6'4", but they've never played it because, when they were in grade 3, their coach told them that they were not very big,
too small.
and that those simple little things can stick with kids. So I'd say be very careful, keep it light, be fun. And be truthful with kids where they stand. They're not dumb. I'd say that's kind of the one word for the athletes and the kind of for the parents.
So true.
And it's okay not to know what you don't know. So that's kind of one thing I'd say too.
That's really I think that's super important, right? I mean, we're not coaching, as parents, our youth leagues, we're not at the top of our game in the professional leagues. So, admit what you don't know, maybe say, hey, I'm going to go research this and we'll bring it back next practice. I think that's really good.
Exactly.
That's a great piece of advice.
Yeah.
So lastly, for the athletes, what would you say to that athlete who, mom or dad is their coach and they get in the car and they're like, oh, I don't want to talk to dad about, practice here. Mom's always getting on me about practicing. What's your best piece of advice there for those athletes?
I mean, I think I'd always kind of say that, I kind of always told my parents, I need a little bit of a venting period where I got to spew what I'm going to say without you going out and yelling back at me and judging. I would yell at my dad for, extended periods of times, and then he'd kind of sit there and take it. And then he'd say, okay, it's okay now, like we can go and discuss it. So I'd say for the athletes, I'd say be able to talk to your parents in a, kind of quick manner, be able to explain to them, listen, I got to vent my frustrations. And then after, let's move on, let's move on. Let's go to dinner. Let's not talk about it. And that's kind of the way that our family process, we could kind of air it out really quickly and then kind of move on right away. Okay. It's not going to linger. It's not going to leak into next practice. It's not going to leak into, church on Sunday. It's not going to leak into dinner at grandma's, right? It's not going to ever blow up, and all this pent up stuff blow up in our faces. We're just going to air it out at the time. And then for athletes that, I would just say, always be resilient. I can't tell you, I probably had 5 to, I wouldn't say 10, but 5 to 7 coaches that said, Stevenson, you probably got to do something else. You probably shouldn't do that. You probably got to move on. It's probably time to, retire, take up something else.
Yeah.
I never kind of said F you, but it was always in the back of my head. I'd always
internally, that's what you're saying.
Exactly. I'll show you. And sure enough, when I finished playing, I was back in my old town, and someone had seen my old coach, and he just could not believe it. He was just shocked. If you could line up 30 kids, I'd be the last one. So I'd say to those kids, don't ever have a coach or don't ever have a parent tell you that you can't do it. I know that sounds very cliche, but I really think you have to believe that, that it comes from yourself. There's going to be so many people that doubt you. There's going to be so many people that say, you can't, this, you can't that. I'd say, if you really do like playing it, go for it, do it. And then just try to do your best at it and have fun. Enjoy the ride, right? It's the journey that's kind of the most important thing. It's not the outcome, right? So.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I think that's super, super on point there. If you had listened to any one of those coaches, you wouldn't be where you are today. You wouldn't have had, those amazing experiences and, playing for a top team and getting to play kind of under your dad, right? I think that's super, unique and probably, special moments that, you'll cherish forever. Right.
I mean, we won the national championship in my 5th year, the final game of my career. So you talk about being nervous, as both a father and a son. This is the last time that you're doing it. You better be on top, one of those ones. So it was special for sure.
That's amazing. I appreciate you taking a little time out of your day here. I will kind of let you get back to, your work day there.
Yeah.
Good luck with kind of the future there and moving on to Guelph. I think I'll still have to cheer for Western if you're against Guelph, but otherwise we'll go for Guelph there.
No, it'll be 8. 7 out of the 8 games I'll be rooting for them. Yeah, definitely.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Amazing. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Thanks, Sean. Bye now.
All right. Bye.